Welcome to Your Family's Health, the program that focuses on healthcare issues with unique and different modalities for taking charge of your health today. Experts talk weekly with our continuing roster of guests from around the country and right here in Nassau County to keep you up to date on the latest health issues and trends. Take care of your mind, body, and soul. Spend the next half hour with the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, and get on the journey to better health.
Hello and welcome to Your Family's Health. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College. And today you're going to learn about medical testing. Our guest today is Sandra Lee, an analytical testing expert and the CEO of NJ Labs, and the host of the Going Beyond Testing podcast, who says that although COVID has brought more attention to the importance of rapid tests at home, there are other types of tests consumers should be familiar with. Sandra, welcome to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into the analytical testing business.
So I've been with NJ Labs since 2013, but prior to that, I went to University of Michigan. I have my degree in chemistry and a master's to teach chemistry. I actually didn't love chemistry growing up, but as I got older and I went to school and started my internship at Pfizer, I began to see how amazing medicine can help improve quality of life, not just medication, but supplements. And I got into testing because I was curious about, hey, what is it that I'm putting into my body? What is it that my family is taking? And how does it actually work? So when I started my internship, I became very interested in the pharmaceutical sciences of it, how it helps people, patients, who take it. Not only that, how do they enhance their health by taking the supplements?
So your business is testing, going beyond testing.
Yes.
What exactly are you testing?
So we work with a lot of manufacturers. So in order to buy something off the shelf, for example, a multivitamin, right? Or even Tylenol for treating fevers and aches and pains, there's a lot of materials that go into those products. So we actually test the actual drug, the API, which is an active ingredient that helps make it the drug, and anything else that goes into that product or multivitamin. So the raw materials, the intermediate blends, and the finished product, so it's safe for consumers to buy.
So how do you differ from the FDA?
We actually are not regulation. So FDA is a body that enforces the law. We actually kind of work with them in terms of making sure that we're compliant. So they can come and inspect us. They are making sure that we're doing the right thing. They're like the police in our industry, basically. So that's the major difference. They're the regulation and we're a testing laboratory.
So is it possible if I have a botanical or a supplement that I'm taking and I'm a little curious about what the constituents of those supplements that I'm taking, can I bring it to your company and you test it?
So we work largely business to business for consumers who are curious about what they're taking. There is on the label a phone number they can contact. Now, these companies or manufacturers, they're testing their products before they bring it to market, every lot or every batch. So they're making sure that, what you're buying is on the label and it matches. So there's something called a certificate of analysis, and that actually shows the different ingredients that they're testing for, the method, and the result, making sure it passes. So for consumers, we highly recommend that if you're very curious, really contact those companies, call those numbers and ask questions. We're a huge advocate of asking questions and making sure you know what you're buying.
Every company is bound by law to put every constituent that's in a botanical or a medication on the label of ingredients. Is that true?
It is true. There is actually this part of law where it's very strict on labeling and what can go on the label. And you're supposed to declare the active ingredients of your product on there, as well as excipients that don't have an actual real purpose, but they're maybe there for binding purposes and that don't have actual health purposes. But everything should be on the label. It's required to be accurate. All the information that's supposed to be on the label is actually dictated by the FDA.
So let's talk a little bit about the at-home tests, COVID tests. What makes them different from the PCR?
So we don't manufacture these rapid tests or PCR testing, but the rapid tests are not as accurate as PCR testing. So PCR testing is very specific, it's much more accurate, and you're not doing it at home. Laboratories are actually doing it.
Okay, so when it comes down to the at-home tests versus the PCR tests, is there anything that we need to know about the constituents of what's in these tests that make them or could make them harmful to us as consumers?
Well, the tests themselves, there's no harm. It's just good to have information. That's why they're making it readily available for everyone to have it at home, because the more information you have about your health, the better it is. And especially if you have compromised immune system, your doctor knows how to treat. But in the event of having different kits at home, it's just great for information. But there is actually no harm because you're not consuming them or putting it into your skin.
So what is the, I would say, predominant thing that you have found in testing medications with your company?
The biggest thing that we find is that there could be a lot of inconsistent results. And one of the major complaints in our industry is, hey, one time we got this type of result, another time we tested the same product and it was a different result. Like, why is that happening? And what we're finding out is that there's a lot of manufacturers who need to partner with the right testing laboratory. That means asking questions, going in person, checking them out, making sure that they're doing exactly what they're saying. So the quality system, there's a lot of deficiencies between laboratories and manufacturing companies, and it's an actual partnership. And we found that that partnership is lacking because the communication isn't there. People forget that whoever owns the brand, when you're buying something on the shelf, they actually own what's supposed to be tested for, right? Just because you're saying, well, I'm not a testing laboratory, I'm not responsible, that's untrue. You're actually responsible from beginning to end. So we're finding out as we work with a lot of different companies, there's different levels of testing, different levels of quality, and it's a matter of finding the right partnership for what you need.
So, for example, if I were to have a bottle of pills of probably vitamins, there is a possibility that there's not that uniformity from pill to pill that's in the container.
Correct. So we call that dosage strength and uniformity of the dosage strength, making sure that when you take a pill that you're consuming exactly what you're supposed to consume, right? Not over or under. That takes a lot of control and it can get very costly. So trying to validate a system that gives you that consistency in dosage takes a lot of effort, and it requires a team. Like working with the laboratory like ours and the manufacturing have a quality team enforcing that, having proper procedures put in place, making sure you're checking and not skipping any quality controls. So that case can present itself if the manufacturing company or the testing laboratory they partner with don't work together, making sure that it's uniform. A lot of companies do those studies, and they make sure that, you know, when you're buying your product that and you're consuming them, it's the right dosage and it's safe for you to take that dosage. So they are confirming it by working with testing laboratories.
Have you found that certain testing laboratories are more accurate than others? Just looking across comparatively from laboratory to laboratory, that there's one that is consistently not doing or following a rule of thumb for uniformity across the board, or do you find that it's inconsistent?
So there are standards. There's something called United States Pharmacopoeia, which is USP, and they're a nonprofit organization, and they have a lot of references out there. You have to pay for a subscription, but it's a very good standard to follow. And with that, there are different levels of test methods. There's different level of quality systems. So depending on the laboratory, there are inconsistencies across the board, depending on what you're testing. So if you're testing for pharmaceutical drugs, things that are prescription or over-the-counter or generic drugs, there's a tighter control. If you're testing for supplements, that control gets a little bit looser. And if you're testing for food, it's a different type of standards that you're following, and it's not as strict as pharma, or supplements. So yes, there are different levels and there's inconsistencies because not everyone's following the same standardization of test methods.
Interesting. You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and today we're learning about medical testing with Sandra Lee, an analytical testing expert, the CEO of NJ Labs, and the host of Going Beyond Testing podcast. So, Sandra, just getting back to this question, I know you're speaking about going beyond testing. Do you have any tips for those who probably would consume the CBD products, dietary supplements? So going beyond testing with this, I know this is very popular, the CBD now. What would you caution consumers as they are purchasing these CBD products?
That's a really good question because CBD products right now is not as heavily regulated as the supplement industry. Because even if the cannabis plant has been around for generations, as a market, it's fairly new. So there's a lot of organizations that are still putting together standardization of testing. Different states have different regulations, so it can get really confusing. So what I do recommend, like I mentioned with the supplements, there are phone numbers, there's a website that you can find out more about your product that you're buying, right? But one of the things that I can highly recommend is look for labels with these two acronyms. One is called CGMP, which means current good manufacturing practices. That kind of follows a standardization that the FDA has set to make sure you're manufacturing clean facilities. Everything's documented. Nothing is falsified. There's integrity to the product, right? And there's no contamination issues as to the best of their ability. And then there's another acronym called USP, United States Pharmacopoeia Testing, which is not quite in the CBD sector yet, but it's in the supplement sector. You can start seeing that on the labels. For the CBD, we highly encourage people to ask questions as the organizations like us and other organizations like AHPA, which is the American Botanical Herbal Association, they're coming together, they're pooling together to make sure that these products are safer for consumers. But as of right now, everyone's doing things differently. One thing I can recommend is check for certificate of analysis because that shows that the product has been tested in an accredited laboratory and that the results are matching your label.
So how are products tested? You know, you talk about testing of products. Mm-hmm. How are they tested?
So each product, before you make the finished product, each ingredient usually has a list of test methods or tests that they're supposed to do, like identification. You want to make sure it truly is what it is. Impurities, making sure heavy metals is not in there. Making sure in order to create or manufacture these materials and finished products, that there's no dangerous or harmful chemicals that could be a carcinogen in the future. There's potency, making sure it is as strong as it should be or not stronger or weaker than it should be. So those are the kind of testing that we do. And we use a variety of different techniques that involve instrumentation that are highly qualified, calibrated, maintained, and cleaned often. And then there's other wet chemistry technique that actually, what people do physically instead of having instruments to do the work. So there's a wide variety of techniques that we use. We encourage people to check our website as well, because the podcast also talks about the different types of techniques that we can do for heavy metal testing, for example, right? We want to make sure there's no arsenic or minimal lead, mercury, cadmium in your products. So we use something called ICP-MS, which is very specific to metals and minerals.
Some of the results of this testing on a website where you actually list if there are carcinogens or maybe things that would be adverse to a person. Is it on a website? Mm-hmm. Is it identified with a label?
FDA.gov has that list. It's public, so anyone can go on that site. FDA.gov, and they have so much information. It can be a little difficult to navigate, but you can see what FDA has issued to the public or to manufacturers or to companies regarding, hey, you have to test for these things. These are carcinogens, and it forces laboratories like us and manufacturers to work together to make sure that we can test it accurately and precisely to make sure it's not in their product. So FDA.gov is a great source of resource.
So tell us about your Going Beyond Testing podcast. Why did you decide to produce this podcast?
One of the things that a lot of people struggle with is when they go on Google and you Google something, you get so much information. It's a complete overload. And I get asked a lot of questions, and I thought it would be so nice to have it centralized and filtered for people, where it's just purely educational. It's not a sales pitch or marketing. It really is just sharing the experience and the knowledge that I have gained over the years. And they're not long. So we decided to do podcasts that touched on each type of topic in general terms so everyone can understand, both consumers and other businesses and manufacturers, to see what's important and how to make sure that, you know, when you're selling your products or you're manufacturing your products or when you're buying them, that it's okay and what to look for and how to make sure it's safe for your family.
So give me some of the topics of the episodes that you have in your podcasts.
One of the ones that we definitely talk about is micro testing and heavy metal testing, and also how methods can vary and how to make sure those methods can be consistent and appropriate for your product. We also talk about consumer safety, and I also had touched a little bit on going out in the market, pulling different CBD products and seeing what's actually being sold out there. And we saw some inconsistencies from the label. And when they specified, hey, it's supposed to have 10 milligrams or 80 milligrams of an ingredient, it actually was higher or lower. So there could be an inflation or deflation of the labeling. And we also talk a little bit of how that can affect your family in the long term, and also kind of guided manufacturers what to look for when you're looking for partnership.
So you're talking about a lack of uniformity across the board when it comes down to purchasing vitamins and herbs. What does that speak, and how does that speak to the lifespan across the board for our babies and for our older adults who are very susceptible to higher doses or lower doses of different herbs and supplements?
I don't recommend people just going out there to buy products just because they saw a commercial or other people are talking about it. I highly recommend people reading reviews and also investigating a little bit about who that company is. The distributor and the manufacturer definitely matters. And there are brands out there that are reputable. So when you contact them, they respond. So it's important to have that open communication. So for people or age groups that are much more sensitive to certain products, it's really important that the buyer understands and educates themselves, which is one of the other reasons why we had launched the podcast series too. The more educated you are in what you're buying, the better you can equip yourself and form a line of defense. And one of the things that we really take pride in is we feel like we're kind of like the last defense between keeping the public safe and what's being manufactured.
So let's move on to other topics with test kits, like tick testing. We talked a little bit about COVID testing, especially during this season. Can you talk about Lyme's disease and its symptoms and what to look for, with testing and all that goes on with particularly Lyme's disease?
Yes. So we have a site called tickshore.com that also has all this information, great information. It has pictures of ticks. I'm not sure how many people are aware, but there are different types of ticks, and those ticks all carry different types of diseases. Majority can pass on Lyme disease, and Lyme disease or any other diseases that ticks can pass on to humans or pets really decrease the quality of life. And unfortunately, there's no cure, right? So a lot of times when we get bit, we don't even know that we're being bit because they kind of numb the bite site. So you don't even know how long the tick is on your body if you do find one, right, embedded into your skin. But they can also pass on diseases that can reflect symptoms like fatigue, headaches, muscle aches at the beginning. But sometimes those symptoms don't even show up until weeks later, and by then it could be too late. But the biggest thing that can really hurt people is if you have heart disease, or you can also experience paralysis in parts of your body that you can't bring back. It's really going to inhibit you from living your life to a fullest. So it's so important to understand ticks can pass on diseases. They are everywhere. You don't have to be in the woods camping. They are hitchhikers. They will grab onto your clothing or your pet very, very easily. But they can also pass on different types of diseases, not just Lyme.
You're listening to Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. My name is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard, and today we're learning about medical testing with Sandra Lee, an analytical testing expert, the CEO of NJ Labs, and the host of Going Beyond Testing podcast. So Sandra, this has been very informative. Can you tell us a little bit about, we're going back to COVID with a particular question about it and a little myth that probably can be busted. So if I've been vaccinated against COVID, does that mean I will always test positive?
So I'm not a medical expert. From reading and research and conversing with multiple different professionals, just because you're vaccinated doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be positive. Vaccination just helps your body fight the infection, right, or to prepare your body to fight it if you're infected or you may come across a positive patient. So vaccination, there's no correlation between vaccination and positive results.
What is your thought about immunizations and this whole big scare years ago about autism and the connection of it because what the immunization contained?
I have 3 kids and I have every single kid vaccinated. Now, every parent is different. Everybody looks at different things and everyone's body immune system response to different immunization shots can be different. But I really believe that I'm protecting my kids by having them vaccinated. I know there are parents who disagree with me and there are parents who agree with me, but I strongly believe that vaccinations are good and the good outweighs the bad.
Do you look at vaccinations and the content and constituents in the vaccinations? Do you ever look at that?
We actually don't,
okay.
But these vaccinations are tested heavily for heavy metals and other impurities because they're tightly controlled. From what I can see for injectables, because we do test injectables, but not the vaccinations itself, the test methods are very strict.
So botanicals, when you say you test the botanicals, define that for me.
Like ginseng, ginger, chamomile, green tea, all these things that we're all familiar with. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, there has been a lot of cases of adulteration, meaning it's not pure. It's not what they say it is supposed to be. So identification of the botanicals is very, very important because as supplement in the botanical industry is not heavily regulated, there's no clinical studies supporting a lot of botanicals and supplements, right? So you just want to make sure that when you're buying them and when you're consuming them or when you're manufacturing with these botanicals, that the identification is there, that the purity is there.
So when heavy metals are in some of these things that we can consume, what are some of the clinical manifestations or clinical things that I can find that you see in people when they are consuming a lot of these heavy metals?
I'm not sure about the clinical side, but USP, United States Pharmacopoeia, has a limit list based on the dosage for heavy metal consumption and making sure that it doesn't go above a certain limit. They're supposed to calculate it and they're supposed to mitigate that risk before it even goes into a finished product.
So when we take in or see these supplements on the shelves, should there be a seal? You talked about a seal before, but should there be a seal? I know there's a label, but is there a seal that I need to look for?
It's not so much a seal. It depends on the label, but I have seen USP testing verified, kind of like a seal on some of these products. And you can see them. But for CGMP, manufactured in a CGMP facility, that's actually part of the label, and you won't see it unless you actually read through the entire label.
And tell me what CGMP stands for again.
It stands for Current Good Manufacturing Practices, making sure that it's been manufactured in a clean facility, there's integrity to their product, documentation is all there, and it's been inspected, especially by the FDA.
Where are most of these places located there that are that these products are put together? Are they in the United States or are they in other countries and imported in?
All over. There are some products that manufactured in other countries and imported. There are some companies that import the raw materials and manufacture it here. And there are some companies who don't import anything and everything is U.S. made. So it really depends.
And in your view, are the U.S. Places where they are producing a lot of these things, or is that more, do you find it to be a better product, or you find that the imports are better?
Generally, U.S. made products are higher quality from what we see.
And tell me about why. Why do you think that is?
The quality systems are better, and FDA regulates at a higher speed and higher standardization compared to other regulations in different countries. What happens is material can be made in India or China, and they say that they're tested, but a lot of times what we see is something called dry labbing, and that's when the results are falsified. They didn't actually go through the rugged, robust testing as they say they are on paper. It's just anyone can make up a piece of documentation. That unfortunately is the truth, and it's very scary and sad. But when it's imported into U.S., it starts following U.S. regulations, which is much tighter.
And when they say on the package that there's no animal testing, what does that mean exactly?
The packaging for no animal testing is that they're not doing clinical studies on the animal for the finished product to make sure it's safe for humans to consume.
How can someone get in contact with you? Give us your website.
Our website is njlabs.com. N as in Nancy, J as in Jersey, so New Jersey actually, and labs.com. So, and for tick information, where we have videos and how we test it and information about different ticks and diseases and symptoms that can manifest, it's TickSure, TickSure.com.
So what is the one thing you want to leave with us when it comes down to medical testing?
I would like everybody to be aware that there are companies that do the right thing, but the most important thing is to educate yourself, ask questions, check out our website and ask questions, contact people if you don't know what to buy or if it's safe. If you have questions, there on every label, there are websites and phone numbers, and I think people can do the best thing they can do is making sure that they contact these companies and make sure that they're safe.
So thank you for being here, Sandra Lee, an analytical testing expert, the CEO of NJ Labs, and the host of Going Beyond Testing podcast. We hope you stay safe and continue to stay healthy. And thank you for being our guest today, Sandra.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun talking with you.
This is Dr. Jeanine Cook-Garard from the nursing department here at Nassau Community College. And we want to thank you for listening to this week's edition of Your Family's Health.
We'd like to get your feedback on your family's health. Send your comments by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu. Podcasts of today's show are available on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This program was produced at the studios of Nassau Community College in cooperation with the nursing department. Join us next week for another edition of Your Family's Health on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.